Honey, pull up a chair and let that tea cool for just a minute. You know, life has a funny way of showing you exactly who people are when they think you've got nothing left to offer them. My name is Ingrid Fairbanks Webb, and at 34 years old, I thought I'd seen every side of my family there was to see. But 4 years ago, on a night that should have been filled with love and celebration, the night before Mother's Day, I learned that I wasn't just the black sheep of the Fairbanks family. I was a ghost they were finally ready to stop haunting. I remember sitting in my little studio apartment, the kind where the radiator whistles a lonely tune all night long. I was grading papers, a stack of fourth-grade essays about what they wanted to be when they grew up. I loved those papers. They were full of dreams about being astronauts, veterinarians, and, yes, even teachers. My phone buzzed on the desk, and I reached for it, thinking maybe it was my sister Victoria or my brother Bradley checking in about the plans for Mom's brunch the next day. But when I looked at the screen, something felt cold. You know that feeling, sugar? When the air leaves the room before you even know why. I had been removed from the Fairbanks Family Dinner WhatsApp group. Just like that. A little gray bubble of text informed me I no longer belonged. I wasn't a sister, a daughter, or even an acquaintance anymore. I was just out. Then came the screenshots from my cousin Rachel. Bless that girl's heart, she was the only one who still saw me. I stared at my mother's words, glowing there in the dark of my room. Margaret Fairbanks, a woman who wore her pearls like a shield and her social standing like a crown, had made her decree. She told my siblings, "All my children are successful except Ingrid. She chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer see her as my daughter." Lowly. That word tasted like copper in my mouth. To my mother, success was measured in the stitching of a Chanel handbag or the zip of a Mercedes G-Wagon. To her I was a budget error. A blemish on the family portrait. I didn't scream, honey. I didn't even cry right then. I just sat there in the quiet, watching the dust motes dance in the light of my lamp, and I realized that the woman who gave me life had just traded me in for a better reputation at the country club. But she didn't know then what I know now. She didn't know that 4 years later, I'd be standing in the Virginia state capitol, with the sun streaming through those high windows and the governor himself waiting to shake my hand. She didn't know that the lowly teacher would become the woman everyone in this state was looking to for leadership. And most of all, she didn't know that she'd be sitting in that audience, uninvited and desperate, trying to find a way back into a life she'd thrown away like yesterday's news. Before I get into the heart of how I built a life from the ashes they left me, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel small by the very people who were supposed to make you feel like a giant? If you've ever had to walk away from a table where love wasn't being served, I want you to know you aren't alone. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're listening from today, and what time it is in your neck of the woods. It does my heart good to know we're all connected in this big, messy world. Now let's go back to the beginning. Back to the Fairbanks household in the suburbs of Virginia. It was a place that looked like a magazine cover. Manicured lawns, colonial pillars, and a silence so thick you could choke on it. My mother, Margaret, had retired early from banking, but she hadn't stopped working. Her new job was the Westbrook Country Club. She spent her days navigating the politics of tea service and charity galas, ensuring her Hermes scarves were draped just so. Then there was Victoria. My big sister was the crown jewel, a plastic surgeon who spent her life fixing other people's imperfections while hiding her own behind a mask of expensive Botox and restaurant table Rolexes. And Bradley, the corporate lawyer who never met a Mercedes he couldn't park in a spot that said, "Look at me." They were the successful ones. They were the ones who brought home the trophies my mother could display on the mantel. And then there was me, Ingrid, the youngest. I was the girl with the 12-year-old Honda Civic and the 4.1 GPA that I wasted on a degree in education. I remember the day I told my mother I was turning down the pre-med scholarship to UVA. We were in the kitchen, and the smell of expensive lilies was everywhere. She didn't speak for 17 seconds. I counted them, honey. 17 seconds of a mother looking at her child like she was a stranger. "You're throwing your life away," she finally said. "For what? A government salary and ungrateful children." She didn't come to my graduation. Said there was a garden party she couldn't miss. Victoria sent a $50 check with a note wishing me luck with my little career. They didn't hate me because I was bad. They hated me because I was ordinary in a way they couldn't brag about. I chose meaning over money. And in my mother's world, those two things were exactly the same as choosing to be poor. The exclusion didn't happen all at once, you see. It was a slow rot. It was the folding table in the corner at Thanksgiving. It was the way my handmade cashmere scarf, the one I spent 3 weeks knitting for Mom, ended up stuffed in the back of the coat closet while she raved about Victoria's designer clutch. It was the birthday dinner where they ran out of room for a 7th chair. Kept trying though. I kept showing up with my casseroles and my smiles, hoping that if I worked hard enough, if I loved them enough, they'd finally see that a 4th-grade teacher had value too. I didn't realize that you can't make someone see your light if they've already decided to close their eyes. That night before Mother's Day, when those screenshots arrived, was the moment the scales finally fell away. I read that message 47 times. I looked for a loophole. I looked for a joke. But there was only the heart emoji from my sister and the understood mom from my brother. I was 30 years old, and I had been erased from the only history I knew. But honey, let me tell you something my own granny used to say. When one door closes, it's usually because the house is drafty and you were meant to build a better one anyway. I didn't cry that night because I was finally done. I was done begging for a seat at a table where I was never welcome. I stayed awake until the sun started peeking over the trees, and I made a choice. If they wanted a ghost, I would give them one. But I wouldn't be a ghost that haunted them. I'd be a ghost that moved on. I didn't know then that my silence would last 4 years. I didn't know that in those 4 years, I'd find a man who loved the dirt under his fingernails as much as I loved the chalk on mine. I didn't know I'd become a mother to a little girl who saw me as her whole world. And I certainly didn't know that the lowly teacher was about to become the most powerful woman in the Fairbanks social circle, without ever saying a single word to them. The stage was set. The receipts were saved, and the world was about to find out exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who knows her worth. Stick around, sugar, because the story is just getting started, and the look on my mother's face when the governor called my name. Well, that's a memory I'll treasure until the day I die. Honey, I hope you've still got that tea in your hand, because this next part is where the shadows started to lift and the real work began. You see, after that Mother's Day morning, the silence from my family was deafening. No calls to see if I was okay, no "oops, we missed you" texts. Just nothing. It's a strange thing to realize you've been mourning people who are still walking around and breathing, but that's exactly what I was doing. I decided right then and there that I wouldn't be the one to break the seal. I blocked their numbers, not out of anger but for peace. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. And my phone had become a little rectangular source of heartache. I deleted my social media apps too. I didn't want to see the curated photos of their perfect holidays or the empty chair at the table that they'd so quickly filled with a centerpiece or a bottle of expensive wine. For 6 months, I lived in a world where the Fairbanks name didn't exist. I poured myself into my 4th graders at Maple Creek Elementary. There's something healing about the honesty of a 9-year-old's sugar. They don't care about your bank account or what brand of scarf you're wearing. They just want to know if you're going to help them understand long division or read them the next chapter of Charlotte's Web. But even in my quiet bubble, the truth had a way of seeping in. My cousin Rachel called me that fall, her voice sounding small. She told me that Thanksgiving photos were up on Victoria's page. They reconfigured the table, Ingrid, she whispered. It's like it was always meant for 6 people. And your mom. She's telling everyone at the club that you're in Africa. I had to laugh, though it felt a bit like swallowing a thumbtack. My mother was so ashamed of a local teacher that she'd invented a whole humanitarian career for me halfway across the world, just so she could keep her head high during bridge club. She'd turned me into a hero in Kenya because she couldn't stand the reality of me in Virginia. It was then I realized she didn't just want me gone. She wanted to own the version of me that people would admire. But while she was busy spinning fables, I was busy planting seeds. That October, a man named Marcus Webb brought his daughter, Lily, to the school for a field trip to his family's organic farm. Now, Marcus wasn't the kind of man my mother would have approved of. He didn't wear Italian suits or spend his weekends at the country club. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen 1,000 sunsets and loved every single one of them. "You must be Miss Fairbanks," he said, shaking my hand. His palm was rough, a working man's hand, and his smile was the first genuine thing I'd seen in a long time. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about you. Says you're the first person who made her feel like she was actually smart." Lily was a precious soul with golden curls and a sadness in her eyes that I recognized all too well. She'd lost her mother to cancer the year before, and Marcus was doing his best to raise her while running 50 acres of farmland. We started talking, first about Lily's reading progress, then over a cup of coffee at the local diner, and eventually, over slices of apple pie on his back porch. I remember the night I told him the truth about my family. The crickets were singing in the tall grass, and the air smelled like ripening peaches. I told him I didn't have a family anymore, that they'd decided I wasn't worth the effort. Marcus didn't look at me with pity. He didn't tell me I should just forgive them, or that blood is thicker than water. He just reached over, took my hand and said, "Family isn't always blood, Ingrid. Sometimes it's just the people who show up when everyone else leaves." And Lord, did he show up. Over the next 2 years, my life transformed in ways I never thought possible. Marcus and I got married under the big old oak tree on his property. There were no designer dresses or champagne towers. I wore a simple white lace dress, and Lily was our flower girl, beaming like a little ray of sunshine. That same year, I officially adopted her. When she handed me that first drawing, 3 stick figures under a big yellow sun with the words, "My mom, my dad, me," I cried harder than I did the night I was disowned. But these were good tears, honey. The kind that washed the salt out of old wounds. I wasn't just building a family, though. I was building a legacy. I spent my nights huddled over textbooks, earning my master's in educational leadership while Marcus watched Lily or tucked her into bed. I worked twice as hard as anyone else because I knew that if I wanted to change the system that called teachers lowly, I had to lead it. I stayed invisible to the Fairbanks clan. I didn't post my wedding photos. I didn't send an announcement when I became the assistant principal. I let them keep their Kenyan fantasy while I was right there in the rolling farmland of Virginia, becoming exactly who I was meant to be. Then came March 2024. I was sitting at my desk, looking at a stack of budget reports when the phone rang. It was the Department of Education. They told me I'd been selected as the new superintendent of schools for Clark County. Me. The girl who wasn't successful enough for a seat at the Thanksgiving table was now in charge of 12 schools and 4,000 students. The news hit the papers 2 weeks later. Local teacher rises to superintendent. There was my face, right on the front page of the Shenandoah Valley Voice. I thought I'd be happy, but mostly I just felt a strange sense of calm. The secret was out. Rachel called me that night, her voice breathless. Victoria just posted the article in the group chat, Ingrid. She asked, "Isn't this our Ingrid? And your mom?" She's furious. Not because she missed you, but because she's been caught in her own lie. 3 days later the email arrived. The subject line read, "From your mother. My dearest Ingrid." It began as if the last 4 years were just a weekend away. She talked about my promotion, about how she always knew I had it in me, and how it would be so wonderful to have the whole family together for Mother's Day. No apology. No mention of the lowly teacher comment. Just an invitation back into the fold now that I had a title she could brag about. I sat there at my kitchen table, looking at the screen, and then I looked at Marcus and Lily playing tag in the yard. I realized then that my mother didn't want her daughter back. She wanted the superintendent. She wanted the woman who could fix her reputation. And that's when I knew. The award ceremony for Teacher of the Year was coming up, and it was going to be televised. My mother was already planning her outfit, practicing her proud mama smile, and telling the world she'd been my biggest supporter all along. She was planning to hijack my moment to save her own skin. But she forgot one thing, sugar. Teachers see everything. And I had the receipts. Honey, there's a specific kind of chill that settles in your bones when you realize the people who birthed you see you as a PR opportunity, instead of a person. After that hollow email from my mother, I thought I'd seen the peak of her audacity. But then Rachel sent me one last screenshot from that family group chat, the one I was still a ghost in. My mother had written, "Wonderful news! Ingrid is being honored at the state ceremony next month. It will be televised. I've already confirmed our attendance. We'll sit in the family section and join her on stage for photos. Victoria, wear your red Valentino. Bradley, bring Carolyn. This is an opportunity to show everyone that the Fairbanks family stands together." She hadn't even asked if I wanted them there. She hadn't asked for my forgiveness. She was just scheduling me. Like I was a centerpiece she was moving from one table to another. Bradley's reply was the one that really stung, even after all this time. Good PR move. That was the moment the last flickering candle of hope I had for them finally went out. Marcus saw it in my eyes. He sat me down and opened his laptop to a folder I didn't even know he had. It was labeled Ingrid, do not delete. Inside, he had saved every single message Rachel had ever forwarded, every time-stamped photo of them celebrating without me, and every lie my mother had posted online. "I knew this day would come," Marcus said softly. "I knew there'd be a moment when you'd start wondering if you were the one who failed them. I kept the receipts so you'd never have to doubt the truth again. They don't want you, Ingrid. They want the version of you that looks good on camera." I looked at those messages. The heart emojis, the lowly teacher slurs, the calculated plan to hijack my ceremony. And I felt a strength move through me that I'd never felt before. It wasn't anger, sugar. It was clarity. "I'm going to let them come," I told Marcus. Rachel, who was on the speakerphone, gasped. She thought I'd lost my mind. She wanted me to call security, to have them barred at the door, to make a scene that would humiliate them before they could even step inside. But I shook my head. "If I do that, Rachel, I'm the villain. I'm the ungrateful daughter who barred her mother from her big day. That's the story they'll tell at the club. No, I'm going to let them sit right there in the second row. I'm going to let them wear their Valentino and their Tom Ford. I'm going to let them practice their smiles." I took a deep breath, looking at my husband and my daughter. "And then I'm going to tell the truth. Not by screaming, but by choosing who gets to be called my family." The night before the ceremony, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notepad and a cup of chamomile. Lily had already gone to bed, whispering that I was going to be the bestest on TV. I started writing my speech. My pen hovered over the paper for a long time. I thought about the Fairbanks name, the name I'd carried for 30 years like a heavy coat that never quite fit. I wrote, "I want to thank my family, the family that chose me, and the family that I chose back." The day of the ceremony at the Virginia State Capitol was one of those crisp, bright mornings where the sky is so blue it looks painted. Walking up those white marble steps, Marcus on one arm and Lily holding my other hand, I felt like I was finally wearing the right skin. I signed in, and the volunteer handed me my badge. Ingrid Fairbanks Webb. I'd legally taken Marcus's name 2 years ago, and seeing it there, printed in bold black ink, felt like a shield. When we walked into the House chamber, the air was buzzing. 500 educators, news crews, and the governor himself were all in that room. We took our seats in the very front row. And then I heard it. That sharp, commanding click of high heels on marble. "Excuse me, that's my daughter up there. I need to be in the family section." I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I could smell my sister's expensive perfume clogging the air. They swept into the row directly behind us, a sea of cream Chanel and red Valentino. I felt my mother's hand touch my shoulder. Her voice a practiced silk. "Ingrid, honey, you look well. We're so proud." I shifted just enough to look at her over my shoulder. My eyes didn't hold any anger, just a quiet, steady light. "My family is sitting right here next to me, Mrs. Fairbanks," I said. The color drained from her face, but she kept that smile pinned on. She actually thought she could force her way into the narrative. She thought that because the cameras were rolling, I wouldn't dare push back. She thought my politeness was a weakness she could exploit. Dr. Eleanor Hart, my old mentor, walked up to the podium. She's a woman who knows the value of a hard day's work, and she wasn't about to let a photo op ruin the sanctity of the moment. She started speaking about my journey, about the literacy rates I'd raised and the lives I'd changed. And then she said the words that made the room go silent. Ingrid didn't have a path handed to her. She built this life with her own 2 hands, supported by the people who truly saw her worth. The camera panned to Marcus and Lily, not to the row behind them. My mother shifted in her seat, the pearls at her neck suddenly looking very tight. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up those steps and looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the teachers who worked 2 jobs to buy supplies for their kids. I saw the principals who stayed until 9 p.m. to talk a student through a crisis. I saw the real world. "I want to thank my village," I began. Thanked my colleagues. I thanked Dr. Hart. And then I turned my eyes to the front row. And most of all, I thank my family. My husband, Marcus, who believed in me when I was invisible. And my daughter, Lily, who taught me that love isn't something you have to earn by having a fancy title. It's something you give freely. I stopped right there. I didn't mention the Fairbanks. I didn't mention the lowly teacher comments. I just left them out of the story entirely. And that's when my mother did the unthinkable. She stood up right there in the middle of the ceremony. "Ingrid, sweetheart, surely you didn't forget your own mother." The room gasped. The cameras swiveled. My mother started walking toward the stage, her cream Chanel catching the light. Her hand outstretched as if she were about to receive the award herself. She was going to play the role of the neglected mother to the very end. But I wasn't that lonely girl in the studio apartment anymore. I was a woman who knew exactly who held her heart. Honey, the silence in that chamber was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. There she was, Margaret Fairbanks, 1 foot on the bottom step of the stage. Her face twisted into that expression she'd perfected over 40 years, the one that said she was the victim of a terrible misunderstanding. She actually thought that if she could just get her hands on that microphone, she could rewrite the last 4 years in front of the whole state of Virginia. I didn't let my voice shake. I didn't let my eyes well up. I leaned into the podium, and I let the microphone carry my words to every corner of that room. "Thank you for attending, Mrs. Fairbanks," I said, my voice as calm as a summer pond. "But the family portion of my speech has already concluded." She froze. Her hand was halfway to the railing, her fingers trembling just a hair. "Ingrid," she whispered, though it carried through the speakers, "I'm your mother." "You said you no longer saw me as your daughter," I replied. I watched her eyes widen as I continued, loud enough for the cameras to catch every syllable. "4 years ago, in a group message to our entire family, you said I was a lowly teacher, and that I was no longer part of your life. I have simply honored your decision." You could hear the gasps ripple through that room like a wind through a cornfield. 500 educators, people who have given their lives to the very profession my mother had mocked, stared at her with a collective chill. I saw a security guard start to move forward, his hand resting politely but firmly near his belt. "The family I thank today," I said, looking directly into her eyes, "is the family that stood by me when I was just a teacher with a dream and a 12-year-old car. The family that didn't require a title or a televised ceremony to show me love." The guard reached her side and whispered something in her ear. My mother looked around the room, and for the first time in her life, she saw herself the way the rest of the world saw her. Not as a queen of the country club, but as a woman who had traded her own child for a bit of social glitter. She turned and walked back to her seat, her shoulders slumped, her perfect Chanel suit looking like a costume that no longer fit. And then, sugar, the most beautiful thing happened. One woman in the middle of the room, a retired teacher with gray hair and a simple cardigan, stood up and started to clap. Then another stood. Then another. Within seconds, all 500 people were on their feet, the sound of their applause thundering against the marble walls. It wasn't just for me. It was for every person who had ever been told their work was lowly. After the ceremony, they tried to corner me in the hallway. Victoria was flushing a deep, angry red in that Valentino dress, and Bradley was trying to use his courtroom voice to tell me I was being unreasonable. "Ingrid, think about the PR," Bradley hissed. "The video is going viral. You're making the family name look terrible." I just smiled at him, feeling the warmth of Marcus's hand on my back. "I'm not a Fairbanks anymore, Bradley. I'm a Webb. And as for the family name, names are just words. Family is about showing up. You didn't show up for 4 years. You don't get to start now just because there's a camera in the room." I turned to my mother one last time. She looked so small, honey. All that money, all those pearls, and she didn't have a single person in that hallway who truly respected her. "I don't hate you, Margaret," I said softly. "Hating you would mean you still have a place in my heart, and that space has been filled by people who actually love me. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but you won't find it with me." We walked out of those Capitol doors into the afternoon sun. We went back to the farm, where the chickens didn't care about awards and the oak tree didn't care about social status. 6 months later, I heard from Rachel that Mom had resigned from her committees and that Victoria had deleted all those fake family photos. They were finally living with the reality of the silence they had created. As for me, I'm still the superintendent. I'm still a wife and a mother. And every morning when I see Lily's drawing on my desk, I'm reminded of the most important lesson I ever learned. You can't choose where you come from, but you sure as sugar can choose where you belong. And honey, I finally belong. Honey, the dust has finally settled, but the lessons, well, those stay green as a mountain pasture. A year has passed since that day at the Capitol, and you'd think a woman like me would be bitter, wouldn't you? But bitterness is a poison you drink hoping the other person will die. chose a different path, chose peace. I still get a letter now and then. The last one arrived on a Tuesday in October, written in that elegant looping cursive my mother spent so many years perfecting. I sat at my kitchen table, the smell of Marcus's wood stove filling the room, and I just held that cream-colored envelope. I didn't rush to open it. I didn't feel my heart race. That's how I knew I was finally healed, because she didn't have the power to make me tremble anymore. In that letter, she didn't try to justify herself. For the first time, the context was gone. She just said she was wrong. She said she was afraid of being judged, afraid that my ordinary life made her a failure. It was a sad letter, Sugar. A letter from a woman who realized too late that she'd spent her whole life building a house of cards, only to have a lowly teacher blow it all down with the truth. I didn't run back to her. I didn't call her and tell her all was forgiven. I just folded the paper, put it in the kitchen drawer, and went outside to help Lily pick the last of the autumn apples. Forgiveness doesn't always mean a seat at your table. Sometimes, it just means letting go of the heavy bag you've been carrying so your hands are free to hold the people who actually matter. The world still whispers, of course. People see me in town and they remember the video. They ask me how I stayed so calm. And I tell them the same thing I'll tell you. When you know who you are, you don't have to scream to be heard. My mother grew up in a world where love was something you earned with a trophy or a title. She didn't know how to love me because she didn't know how to love herself without a country club membership to tell her she was worth something. I can have compassion for that wound, but I don't have to let it bleed on me anymore. If you're sitting there today, feeling like you're the lesser one in your family, or like your hard work doesn't count because it doesn't come with a fancy paycheck, I want you to look at me. Look at this lowly teacher who became the superintendent. Look at this erased daughter who built a family out of nothing but kindness and a farmhouse kitchen. Success isn't about the name on your badge or the car in your driveway. Success is being able to look in the mirror at the end of the day and know that you didn't trade your soul for a seat at a table where you weren't loved. I'm Ingrid Fairbanks Webb, and I'm a teacher. I'm a wife. I'm a mama. And for the first time in my 34 years, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Thank you for sitting with me today, honey. It's been a long road, but the view from here is just beautiful. Remember to protect your peace, keep your receipts, and never ever let someone else tell you what your life is worth. I'll see you in the next story. God bless. Honey, we've come to the end of this particular road, but I want to leave you with one last thing to tuck into your heart before you go. People often ask me if I regret that day at the Capitol, if I regret speaking the truth so plainly in front of all those cameras. They wonder if I feel bad for humiliating a woman who, at the end of the day, is still my mother. And I tell them the same thing I'm telling you now. The truth isn't a weapon, it's a boundary. I didn't humiliate her. She chose her actions 4 years ago, and I simply chose not to help her hide them anymore. You see, Sugar, there's a big difference between keeping the peace and protecting your peace. For 30 years I kept the peace. I swallowed the insults, I sat at the folding tables, and I wore the thin smiles just to make sure the Fairbanks family looked good for the neighbors. But keeping the peace meant I was at war with myself. Protecting my peace meant I finally decided that my dignity was worth more than her reputation. That farmhouse of ours is never quiet these days. Between Lily practicing her piano scales, bless her, she hits a wrong note every now and then, but she keeps on playing, and Marcus out there tinkering with that old tractor, there's a beautiful kind of noise everywhere. It's the sound of a life built on solid ground. I still have that folder Marcus made. Every now and then, when the world gets a little too loud or someone tries to tell me I'm not doing enough, I look at those screenshots. Not to stay angry, but to remind myself of how far I've climbed. Those messages are the evidence of the fire I walked through, and the woman I am today is the gold that came out of it. If you're out there right now, struggling with a family that only loves the successful version of you, or if you're being told that your heart's work isn't high status enough, I want you to take a deep breath. Your worth is not a performance. You are not a PR move. You are a human being deserving of a love that doesn't have a price tag or a dress code. I'm going to go finish my tea now and see if I can help Lily with her history project. Life is short, honey, but it's plenty long enough to start over and find the people who truly see you. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a blessing to share it with you. If this spoke to your soul, don't be a stranger. Leave a comment and let me know you're out there. And if you're looking for another story to keep you company, just look for the link in the description. There's always another chair at my table for you. Take care of yourselves and remember, the most important lesson you'll ever teach is the one you show the world by how you treat yourself. I'm Ingrid and I finally know what family really means. Good night, sugar.